Fake HOA tried to evict veteran. His lawyer was a state Supreme Court judge. Part 1. The small town of Fairmeadow had always prided itself on its postcard perfection. It was the kind of town where every driveway was pressure washed, every lawn cut in diagonal patterns, and every American flag flown at precisely the same angle on national holidays. Nestled near the end of Maple Street stood a modest one-story brick home with a slightly faded roof and a ramp that led from the driveway to the front door. The yard wasn't overgrown, but it wasn't manicured either. In the flower beds were a few sun-bleached pinwheels, and above the porch fluttered a large American flag. The flag had meaning. It belonged to Samuel Tyson, a 72-year-old black veteran who had served 2 tours in Vietnam and spent the next 30 years training young recruits on how to survive combat. He had medals, stories, and scars, most of them invisible. His wife had passed a few years prior, and now it was just him and his service dog, a German shepherd named Max. Samuel didn't ask for much. He kept to himself, paid his bills on time, volunteered at the VFW hall, and helped neighbors when he could. But in Fairmeadow's new luxury subdivision, the Willows at Fairmeadow, he stood out. Not because he was loud, not because he caused problems, but because he didn't fit their image. Enter Karen Langley. At 47, Karen had perfected the art of community curation. She wasn't elected to any official position, but that didn't stop her from acting like the mayor of the Willows. Blonde, always in crisp white linen or pastel blazers, Karen treated her cul-de-sac like a gated kingdom. She had formed a residential quality board, which wasn't legally recognized by the town or the developers. But that didn't matter. With custom stationery and newsletters full of bolded, italicized, passive-aggressive guidelines, she wielded control like a velvet hammer. Her new project? Bringing the community up to uniform standard, which in her mind meant no lawn ornaments, no chipped paint, no mismatched fences, and definitely no unapproved structures, like Samuel's front porch ramp. Karen had walked by his home one too many times, lips pursed, clipboard in hand. The ramp, she claimed, looked temporary, and the oversized flag was not HOA approved. The real issue, Karen simply didn't like how his house looked, and more specifically, how he, Samuel, looked. To her, he didn't fit the Willows. One Thursday morning, Samuel found a yellow envelope tucked into his screen door. He opened it with a confused frown and read the printed letter. Dear Mr. Tyson, you are in violation of several residential standards, including excessive display of unsanctioned patriotic materials, unpermitted structural additions, ramp, overall property aesthetic misalignment with community visual values. You are hereby given 30 days to comply or vacate. Failure to respond may result in legal action. Sincerely, Karen Langley, the Willows Residential Quality Board. Samuel blinked. Vacate? He sat down on his porch swing, Max resting at his feet, and stared at the paper. What the hell is a residential quality board? At the cafe down the street, Karen sipped her oat milk latte while chatting with her friend Lila. I've done everything by the book, she said smugly. He's got 30 days. Lila looked unsure. But he's a veteran. Karen raised a brow. And that doesn't give someone a free pass to bring the property value down. This is about the future of the neighborhood. Samuel didn't respond to the letter. Instead, he took it down to the Fairmeadow City office, where he met with a young clerk named Gina. She read the letter and laughed out loud. This isn't even legal. These people have no authority to evict anyone. The Willows doesn't have an HOA. They're just playing dress up. Samuel raised an eyebrow. Then why does this feel like a threat? Gina's smile faded. Because it is one. The next week, Karen doubled down. She mailed out flyers to all the homes in the Willows titled, Let's Beautify Our Neighborhood Together. Beneath that heading was a list of violations with vague photos taken from afar, clearly including Samuel's ramp, flag, and front yard. Then she did something bold and stupid. She went on a local community podcast called Fairmeadow Voices, where she was interviewed about the decline in neighborhood values. Well, Karen said sweetly, some residents don't quite understand the tone of our community. We have people with military flags the size of truck tarps, porches that look like emergency ramps, and dogs barking at all hours. This isn't a trailer park. This is the Willows. It was supposed to be a quiet show, but someone clipped the audio, paired it with a photo of Samuel's home, and posted it online with the caption, "Fake HOA Karen tries to evict 72-year-old veteran for having a ramp and a flag." The internet did what it does best. It erupted. Within 48 hours, the story had gone national. Veteran advocacy groups shared it. Military TikTokers stitched reactions to it. A video of Max sitting beside Samuel on the porch, with the flag fluttering overhead, hit 1 million views in a day. The hashtags began to trend. Shashi ramp rights, Shashi justice for Samuel, Shashi fake HOA Karen. Karen's phone blew up. Her inbox flooded with hate mail. People left negative reviews for the entire subdivision online, calling it a place where heroes aren't welcome. Her initial reaction? "I'm being attacked for having standards." But it was too late. And then the real blow came. One morning, as Samuel stood outside sipping coffee, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. A tall black woman in a tailored navy pantsuit stepped out. "Sam," she called warmly, "still flying that flag, huh?" Samuel squinted. Then his face lit up. "Amara?" Amara Blake was more than a lawyer. She was Justice Amara Blake, recently appointed to the state Supreme Court. But before that, she had been a young law clerk who served with Samuel's help in her early career. He had mentored her through law school, given her rides to exams, and sent her grocery gift cards when she couldn't afford food. "You raised me," she said simply. "Now it's my turn." Karen didn't know who Amara was. Not yet. When she received the cease and desist letter, complete with state Supreme Court letterhead, she nearly choked on her green smoothie. The letter was concise, sharp, and lethal. "Your actions have no legal authority, and your attempt to evict a disabled veteran may be grounds for civil and criminal review under multiple state statutes, including discrimination against protected groups." It ended with a direct statement. "Any further contact with Mr. Tyson will result in immediate legal escalation." Karen dropped the letter on her marble kitchen island and screamed. Across the neighborhood, people were picking sides. Some neighbors, especially the older white families, quietly supported Karen, whispering about property values and aesthetics. But the majority? They were furious. One young father, Darren Martinez, put up his own flag and added a sign, "We stand with Samuel." By the end of the week, 10 more flags had gone up. A veteran from the next block offered to paint Samuel's fence. A local teacher dropped off baked goods. Kids came by to ask about Max and hear stories about Samuel's service. Karen watched from her window, seething. "Traitors," she muttered, but even Trish didn't return her calls anymore. Part 2. Karen Langley had always believed she was untouchable. With her pastel suits, silk scarves, and manicured lawn, she carried herself like a local dignitary. She wasn't used to being challenged. She had built a bubble of compliance around her, neighbors who nodded, avoided confrontation, or quietly agreed just to avoid her wrath. But now, the bubble had burst. And it was Justice Amara Blake who popped it. The cease and desist letter sent shockwaves through the Willows. Some residents who had sided with Karen out of convenience began to reconsider. Others who'd stayed silent were now emboldened. Meanwhile, Karen retreated into damage control mode. She contacted a local lawyer, someone her husband had used for estate documents, and demanded he draft a rebuttal to Amara's letter. But after reading it, the man simply said, "Karen, you need to stop." She slapped the letter on his desk. "I have every right to enforce standards." He looked at her with weary eyes. "You don't have any legal standing. The Willows doesn't have a recognized HOA. You're not a board. You're a group of neighbors playing pretend with stationery." Karen refused to accept it. Instead, she doubled down. Again, she scheduled a special community hearing at the Fair Meadow Recreation Center. She printed glossy flyers that said, "Defend the Willows, stop the chaos, restore order." Her plan was simple: paint herself as the misunderstood protector and Samuel as a disruptive force. But Karen had underestimated two things: how far the story had spread, how many people were done staying quiet. The night of the hearing, the parking lot was full by 5:30 p.m. News vans lined the curb. Veterans in uniform stood shoulder to shoulder with young families holding small flags. The mayor of Fairmeadow attended. So did local reporters and school board members. Samuel arrived wearing a clean navy blazer and his old military pins. Max trotted loyally beside him, vest gleaming. And walking next to Samuel, poised and powerful in her deep green suit, was Justice Amara Blake. They didn't need to say anything. Their presence was enough. Inside, the room was split. On one side, Karen, flanked by a few loyalists, mostly retirees who still clung to the fantasy of exclusivity. On the other, Samuel's neighbors, veterans, teachers, postal workers, teenagers, and families of all backgrounds. Karen took the stage first. Her voice quivered slightly, but she hid it behind her usual polished tone. "I never wanted this to turn into a spectacle," she began, "but someone has to stand up for community values, for property stability, for decorum." There were murmurs in the crowd. One man near the back snorted, "She means control." Karen continued, eyes darting. Mr. Tyson's home, while appreciated for its patriotic display, does not align with the architectural harmony of the Willows. And we must consider safety as well. The ramp, for example. She stopped, because Amara had stood up, and the room shifted. Justice Amara Blake didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "My name is Amara Blake," she said, calm and measured. "I am a justice on the state Supreme Court. I am also the legal representative of Mr. Samuel Tyson, a decorated veteran, a man who bled for this country while some of us were still in elementary school." A pause. "Ms. Langley, your actions are not merely unauthorized. They're unethical, exclusionary, and potentially discriminatory." A quiet, rose from the audience. "You created a fake HOA to intimidate residents into following rules you made up. You sent letters threatening eviction without legal jurisdiction. You leveraged fear to silence diversity. And worst of all, you tried to paint yourself as the victim when people said no more." Karen's face drained of color, but Amara wasn't done. She stepped aside and gestured toward Samuel. "Let me tell you what real community looks like." She turned to the audience. "This man, this neighbor, built a ramp because his knees ache from old war injuries. He flies a flag not to provoke, but because it reminds him of friends he lost in combat. He tends his yard with care. He waves to kids. He belongs here." Cheers. Applause. Samuel stood quietly, eyes misting. The mayor stepped forward next. "I've heard enough," she said. "We're opening an official investigation into the Residential Quality Board. Ms. Langley, you are not recognized by the town, and any further attempts to enforce authority will result in legal charges." Then came the final blow. A tall man in a suit, standing at the back of the room, raised his hand. "I'm with the state's Department of Justice. We've also opened a review into potential housing discrimination practices under fair housing laws." Gasps. Karen clutched the edge of the podium, stunned. And then, quietly, finally, she sat down. Outside, the energy was electric. People came up to hug Samuel. Young men saluted him. A little girl handed him a handmade drawing of Max with a flag in the background. A reporter shoved a mic toward him. "Mr. Tyson, how does it feel to finally be heard?" Samuel gave a gentle smile. "Feels like home again." Then Amara stepped in, wrapping her arm around his shoulder. "This is what justice looks like," she said. Back at Karen's house, the silence was deafening. She sat alone, reading headlines on her phone. "Veteran almost evicted by fake HOA. Judge shuts it down. Fair Meadow community rises up for hero. HOA Karen exposed. Neighborhood rejects control. Chooses compassion." Her inbox was full of messages, most of them angry. A few former allies had sent cold apologies and distanced themselves. One line stuck out from an anonymous message. "You messed with the wrong man, and the right woman had his back." By the end of the week, Karen's so-called board dissolved. Lawsuits were pending. The city revoked her ability to post signage. Her name became a cautionary tale. And across the street, Samuel raised his flag a little higher. This time, no one dared question it. Part 3. For the first time in years, Karen Langley felt small. Not the kind of small that came from being ignored or passed over. This was different. This was the kind of small that came when the image she had crafted, the perfect woman of order, of standards, crumbled in full view of her community, her friends, and even her own family. The official investigations began swiftly. The Fair Meadow City Council had not only stripped Karen and her fake residential quality board of any standing, but also issued fines for unauthorized enforcement of housing policies. A class action suit followed from residents who had received her intimidating letters over the years. Some demanded money back for voluntary fees. Others simply wanted an apology. But what cut deepest were the faces. Neighbors she had known for years, people who once smiled and waved, now crossed the street to avoid her. Trish, once her closest ally, now dropped her gaze whenever their paths crossed at the grocery store. And worse still, Emily, her daughter, had sent only a short email. "You didn't just humiliate yourself, Mom. You embarrassed me. You forgot what it means to be decent." Karen sat at her kitchen table that night, her untouched tea growing cold, and whispered to the silence, "I don't even know who I am anymore." Across the street, life bloomed. Samuel Tyson's porch was now a place of laughter. Veterans, school kids, families, they all dropped by. The ramp he'd built now had flower pots along the edge, and a small wooden bench had been donated by a local carpenter. Someone had even crafted a wooden sign that read, "Home of Sergeant Tyson, hero, neighbor, friend." Samuel took it with quiet humility. Max sat loyally at his side, tail wagging when kids came by. Samuel told stories, sometimes funny, sometimes heavy. But through it all, he never once spoke badly of Karen. "She's still a neighbor," he said one afternoon, "and maybe she just got lost in her own rules." But not everyone was as gracious. The internet didn't let up. Karen's name still floated in hashtags. Videos of Amara Blake's powerful speech racked up millions of views. Even local journalists now used Karen Langley as shorthand for suburban overreach. Every time she opened her phone, she saw herself, frozen on stage, being silenced by a Supreme Court judge, the symbol of her undoing. And then came the final nail. Her real estate license, something she had worked hard to earn years ago, was officially suspended due to conduct unbecoming and misrepresentation of authority. Karen sobbed. This time it wasn't pride or anger. It was shame. But then something changed. It began with an envelope. Plain. No return address. Taped to her door. Inside was a note. "Mistakes don't define you. How you fix them does. You hurt people, but you still live here. Start showing up the right way." No, a neighbor. Karen stared at the words. There was no venom, no mockery, just truth. That night, she stood in front of her bathroom mirror and forced herself to look. No makeup, just bare face, tear-stained and raw. "I don't want to be feared," she whispered. "I want to be human." So she began again. Karen didn't hold a press conference. She didn't post a stage apology. She simply walked across the street with a brown paper bag and rang Samuel's doorbell. When he opened the door, Max perked up, sensing something different. Karen cleared her throat. "I baked these. Banana walnut muffins." Samuel tilted his head. "I know you're allergic to almonds," she added. That made him smile. "I didn't know you listened." "I didn't," she admitted, "but I started asking." He took the bag and stepped aside. "Come in." They sat in silence at first. Karen looked down at her hands. "I could try to explain, but I think I'd just be justifying the unjustifiable." Samuel nodded slowly. "You were scared of change." "I was scared of losing control," she whispered, "of losing the neighborhood I thought I had built. But I didn't build anything. I just enforced." She looked up at him, eyes damp. "I'm sorry." Samuel didn't rush to reply. Instead, he poured her a cup of coffee and simply said, "Let's build something better now." That afternoon, Karen joined him at the community park. She didn't try to take over. She didn't correct anyone. She painted birdhouses with school kids, picked up trash along the fence, and said thank you more than she ever had in her life. Monica, a neighbor Karen had once fined for having too many guests, walked up to her, arms crossed. Karen stood. "Before you say anything, I know, I was wrong." Monica raised an eyebrow. "You were cruel." Karen nodded. "I'm still trying to forgive myself." After a pause, Monica sighed. "Keep showing up. We'll see." The real turning point came on Veterans Day. The town had organized a parade, and Samuel had been named Grand Marshal. Flags flew across Maple Street, not enforced but chosen. Kids carried handmade signs. Fire trucks rolled down the block. And standing in the reviewing section, holding a small clipboard, not with orders, but with names of volunteers, was Karen. She hadn't expected to be acknowledged. But when the mayor gave a speech honoring Samuel, she paused and looked directly at Karen. We thank those who serve and those learning how to serve their neighbors better. A few people clapped, then more, until the entire park echoed with applause. Karen wiped a tear and whispered, "Thank you." Weeks later, a letter arrived at her door. This time it was from Emily. "I saw the videos. I'm proud of you. Not because you got it right, but because you didn't run from getting it wrong. I love you." Karen cried harder than she had in years. Not from shame, from relief, from healing. 1 year later, Maple Street looked the same, but felt entirely different. No fake board, no threats, just neighbors. Samuel still flew his flag proudly. His ramp now had decorative lighting for the holidays. Max was a local legend. And Amara? She still visited, usually quietly, always respectfully. Karen now ran the Fairmeadow Community Inclusion Board, a new city-backed group that promoted understanding, cultural exchange, and equitable living. She didn't lead with rules anymore. She led with listening, and every now and then she'd walk up to new residents with a plate of muffins. Not a warning, not a list, but a simple welcome. And when they asked about the neighborhood, she'd smile and say, "We've learned a lot here, and we're still learning." The end.